Predator, Killer of Killers is a new animated anthology film set in the Predator universe. The timeline follows 3 different characters in 3 different time periods. You got Ursa, set in the Viking time period. You have Kenji and Kiyoshi, more feudal Japan, samurai storyline. And then you have John Torres in World War II. A Predator will show up in each story, and it's about seeing how they get out of that situation, how they stop this thing, how this all ties together. This movie kind of came out of nowhere. I feel like it was very recently when they announced, like, yeah, this animated film is coming to Hulu, look out. You know, we already were kind of aware that Predator Badlands was on the horizon, Dan Trachtenberg directing again after Prey. This one came out of nowhere, but I was very interested to see it once they had announced it and showed some marketing material for it. It was co-directed by Dan Trachtenberg. You also have Joshua Wasung, who's got a long history in visual effects, coming in to co-direct as well. So I was really interested to see how this worked out, because recently I really loved Prey. I thought that was a really great, you know, kind of back to basics kind of Predator story, but setting it in this completely different time period than what we've been used to was really cool, really special, just a really great idea. And I feel like for like hour 30-minute, hour 40-minute movie, they had enough, you know, story to ground the character Naru, played by Amber Midthunder, in that film. So I definitely felt like after The Predator with Shane Black, who is usually a guy whose movies I enjoy, The Predator, though, was a weird, bad thing that I wish they didn't make. It kind of looked like the franchise was a little dead or going in a direction that just wasn't, you know, something I wanted to see. But Prey was a bit of a course correction that I think they needed, and I like that they have entrusted Dan Trachtenberg, you know, kind of keeping him around now with these other films, because I feel like when he came onto the scene in 2016 with his feature film 10 Cloverfield Lane, I thought that was great, and I still think it's great. And there was definitely a point where I was like, okay, he's directing some TV stuff, but man, it's really been a while since he's directed a feature film. I'm glad that it seems like he's found a home with the Predator stuff, and he's directed another great one with this. I just gotta say really quickly, you know, everyone's gonna talk about like the animation, the action sequences, and yeah, that's really one of the biggest takeaways here, is that because they're doing this through animation, they can get away with so much more that you could attempt in live action, but there's always that risk, that chance that it, you know, doesn't come across, that it could look hokey, you know, visual effects or something don't work, it doesn't translate well to screen. But with animation, you can just go full force with the vision, right? And it looks spectacular. They've picked like, it has like the character design of something like Arcane, a show that I really love, animation that I think is great, but like the frame rate of like Spider-Verse or like the recent Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie. And I thought that was a wonderful choice. I like that the recent trend in animation seems to be, don't just do like what Pixar and DreamWorks were doing for a long period of time, this kind of like realistic looking animation. Not that that is awful or anything, but there's just a lot of other, you know, movies out there trying to ape on that style, and you know, it can come across boring, or it doesn't look as good if you don't have, you know, the production budget, you know. So I do like that there is more of like a drive for more artistic visions when it comes to animation, and I think it works in the benefit of this. The characters look great, the predators that they pick as well, because there's different ones for each time period. I thought they animated those so well, so many clever designs and clever like weapon choices, you know, like I felt like these are the perfect predators to place wherever you needed them in the story. They just, a lot of thought went into that, and I really appreciated that. And yeah, the action is brutal. It's gory. Predators, you know, when they can go, you know, they do not hold back, and there's just some wonderful spurts of violence in this, but it doesn't take away from any like tension from any actual action sequences, because you do still have to follow like the main people. You know, it kind of follows similar Predator movie structure where another movie is going on until the Predator comes in. So you still have to believe that the warriors that they're going to end up fighting, you know, the other, you know, characters that are going to get involved could potentially stand a chance. And they did a really great job with those action sequences as well. Like the Viking one that you open up with Ursa and her son Anders, you know, it's like that brute kind of like force meeting another bigger, brutier force that is really cool to see. But then you get to the feudal Japan one, seeing like this samurai drama kind of play out in like the, you know, sword action sequence, and then following that up with, all right, now how do you take those skills and put them against a predator? I thought it was just really well thought out, and I really liked the direction that story took. A final moment, and you might know, you know, when you see it, what I'm talking about, a final moment where I was like, oh, how are they going to wrap this up? And it just completely, you know, took me out. It was like, oh, wasn't even thinking that. That is crazy. That is so cool. Like I was really kind of like swept away by a lot of what they were doing. And I like how when they get to a more traditional one, like the World War II one, it's like, yeah, it's in the 40s, a couple years before, Arnold, Dutch in the first Predator, as far as like, warfare. But still, like it's the closest that you could get to some of the other ones that we've already seen. It's a little bit more modern compared to the Viking and the Samurai and the Native Americans in Prey. But I do like how they switch it up with like, all right, the other ones are like ground assaults, fighting like with hand to hand or just getting body slammed by a predator. This one is mostly focused on aerial stuff, which we haven't really seen a lot of, like in The Predator, there was like a little bit of like trying to take down a ship. But I do like how in that segment, the World War II segment, you just have all these other planes flying around and then there's just this huge monster of a ship and everyone's just trying their best. And I like how they work their way around that as well, where it's like, okay, there is a bit of a fighting chance. You need that heart though. You need a character's heart and clever thinking. But I like how they figured that stuff out. It's just a really entertaining movie all around. Each segment, is just this wonderful new action sequence. But also they give you enough story as well where you're like, okay, I get it. I get the characters, I get the personal stakes, and I get how devastating it is now that they're just seeing like this, thing that they have never seen before, upending everything. It's one of those things I feel like with anthology films, you run the gambit of, you get too invested in one storyline and maybe you wanted to see a bit more closure or just a bit more detail with one before you go to another one. I felt like, keeping it pretty simple, you got your three and an epilogue, and having each one have just enough story to get you invested, enough of like a different flavor narratively and character-wise that you can get invested and you understand everything and you don't feel like you're missing anything once it wraps up. You're not like, oh, but I wanted to see more, blah, blah, blah. I felt like they really paced that out really well. Obviously, big testament to, Dan Trachtenberg, anyone else who had like a story by credit on this, but also the actual screenwriter, Miko Robert Rutter, who, if you just look him up on IMDb, you might be like beforehand, you might have been like, oh, this movie's gonna be fucked. What kind of writer are they getting? And I don't want to be mean, but yeah, like if you just look at it face value, it's like, it's not great. But, the actual writing that goes into this, I found really impressive, like they give you just enough, they keep it moving, it's well paced, combined with the excellent technical display with the animation and the well thought out action sequences, great, visual cinematography, just really great stuff. I mean, the second segment is mostly dialogue free. You have an actor, Louis Ozawa, playing Kenji and Kiyoshi, for a brief bit of time, but for the most part, it's played out without any dialogue. And I thought that was really impressive as well. So to understand that restraint too, I thought was really cool. And in the epilogue section, I don't want to spoil too much because I didn't really know how much they were going to tie stuff in or what direction the story was going to go into, but I do like how they, interweave these things and tie it all up at the end of the day. And also some really great voice acting. I mentioned Louis Ozawa, but Lindsay Levanchi, who plays Ursa, the Viking mother warrior in the first one, she's great. She's got a really, brute strong voice, but can also be broken and have like a personal side. She's really fantastic. And Rick Gonzalez, who plays John Torres, he's a lot of fun. His segment, I feel like that could be the most jarring just because it feels very Spielbergian in like the sense of like there's some quips and the music's a little bit more fun, I think, also compared to the other two. It's dealing with like World War II, so it does feel like they're embracing a bit more of that like, we gotta get out there and fight those Nazis kind of, that more like, not necessarily propaganda, but just that sensibility of like keeping things little light, we're the underdogs and we're gonna get them, don't worry about us kind of vibe. So that had the biggest risk as far as like you pair it with these other like revenge, personal stakes and dramatic stories, and then you just have, well, I got a rough deal, but we're gonna make it work kind of upbeat vibe. But I really think they make that work. I really enjoyed John Torres in this. If I had to have any issue with this movie, I will say that during the epilogue, similar to what I said recently about the movie Heretic, that's when you get into a bit more of like Hollywood like choices, creative choices that aren't inherently bad. It's just there's a stark difference between what they've been doing and what they start to do near the end. And I feel like including a bit more of that with the World War II segment was kind of their way of like, well, when we get to that epilogue, this segment is going to be the thing that, you know, bridges it together. But I don't think it was like 100% seamless. It also reminds me of a certain creative choice they made early on with the Vikings, where there's a little bit of like subtitles, but for the most part they're speaking English. And I just feel like maybe the first segment could have just been, you know, Nordic language. Like, I have no problem just reading the subtitles. And that to me also felt a little like Hollywood, you know, studio creative choice that isn't, like I said, isn't inherently awful. It's just one that maybe is a little bit distracting. Overall, though, this is a blast. I do like how narratively this opens up more of like what you could explore with the Predator world, how it could connect to other films. But I also like that there is still like a bit of mystery. Not everything is entirely clear. It's a self-contained anthology kind of story that I think really works. And it's kind of hard to even call it an anthology story because it's not like they're completely separate from each other or there's vague references. Like, the epilogue really does some good work to bring it all together and to you know, close out some character arcs that I thought were really cool. So yeah, this is just another great win for the Predator franchise with Dan Trachtenberg at the helm. I look forward to Predator Badlands. I hope they keep him around for more, and you know, maybe he could be involved with some other franchise stuff because I think he's still a fantastic director. I'm gonna give Predator Killer of Killers an A. Check this out. It's free on Hulu if you have it, obviously. Just some great animation, great voice acting, terrific violent action sequences, a great musical score by Benjamin Wallfish as well. My only issue is, you know, I wish I could have seen this and Prey on the big screen, and I know Predator Badlands will be in theaters, unless Hulu makes a bad decision in a couple months. But I really would have loved to have seen the visuals for Prey, but also this one on the biggest screen possible. I know Prey was a bit like, you know, 2022, some theaters are still open, but COVID, you know, and also the Predator flopped. But I wish this one, at the very least, could have been on the big screen. I would have loved to have seen this animation that big. But if you've seen Predator Killer of Killers, leave your thoughts in the comments below what you thought of it. And as always, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe. I'm Jackson Fulcher. See you guys next time.